Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel. Today's video is all about Simon Hurley for Ranger's latest release and many ways to use his lunar paste. Some of you may remember that I featured the lunar paste in one of my new and must-have crafty supplies videos. But everyone was so excited about it that it sold out super fast. Thankfully, Ranger was able to make a ton more, and so now it is available in all of the colors. So I wanted to share a bunch of different ways to use it and focus on the latest Simon Hurley products as well. Let's take a look at the lunar paste and the colors that you can get. These are the 5 colors that are currently available of lunar paste. So there's a red, orange, yellow, green, and blue. The lunar paste has a really fun consistency. It's almost like a whipped mousse or something. It is very smooth and buttery, easy to slide along a stencil, and I'm going to use it with a spatula here to swatch out the colors on white cardstock and black cardstock. So the red is called Bee Sting, the orange is called Traffic Cone, and I'm using kind of a thick application just so you can see the coverage that you can get if you use that thick application. It does take a little bit longer to dry, but really not too bad. The yellow is called Slippery When Wet and is almost like a gold color. The green is called Later Gator. Another thing about these colors is that they are true on both black and white cardstock, which I really love. There's no clear paste in them. It's all the color of the lunar pastes. And they just show up beautifully on both dark and light colors of cardstock. And this is how they look when they dry. When they dry, they're even shinier than they are when they're still wet. Now we're just going to dive into a bunch of card making and different ways to use it. The first way to use lunar paste is to apply it over a stencil. So I'm using the Mosaic stencil from Simon Hurley. This is part of his new release, and it's technically a slimline stencil. I'm just going to do one of the mosaics, and I'm going to center it in an A2 piece of cardstock. So I'm using white cardstock first, and I'm going to just tape off everything else because I'm going to use Therm Stencil Pal, which is going to help me get a nice even coverage, but I don't want to get any lunar paste where I don't want it. So everything is really taped off there. I'm just going to apply some of the lunar paste to the stencil pal and then use it at an angle and swipe it downward until the entire opening of the stencil is covered with lunar paste. You can put whatever you didn't use back in the bottle. And check that out. This coverage is a little thicker, so it'll have a tiny touch of dimension and all that shine once it's dry. I'm going to do the same exact thing on black cardstock so that you can see how true the color is on both the black and the white cardstock and how nice this type of application turns out. So you can see this is probably the thickest way to apply the paste, and I'm going to set this aside to dry while we go through our other types of applications of the lunar paste. I am going to use a domed foam blender. I've applied a pretty thick amount of the Blue Skies lunar paste right onto that dome foam blender, and I am just going to rub like I would with ink in kind of a circular motion. So on this piece of white cardstock, I'm doing the Blue Skies at the top and the Later Gator at the bottom. It kind of creates that background that looks like grass and sky, and then when it dries though, it's going to be so shiny. So a beautiful shiny grass and sky for a background. Just remember to clean off your foams if you don't want them to harden, because if you leave too much of the lunar paste on the edge of the foam, it will harden and you won't be able to use it again. But just spray it with a little water and get it on some paper towel there. I'm also going to try a dry brush effect. So I'm just going to swipe the Bee Sting from left to right, and you can see that you get that nice thick application on the left hand side, and then you get that dry brush look on the right hand side. I'm going to do all 5 colors here so that we can create a rainbow. And I love the Slippery When Wet. When it's dry, it is just golden and beautiful. All the colors are amazing though. Look at that green. I don't think that I could create such a nice green even if I tried with the blue skies and slippery when wet. So I was really appreciative that Ranger and Simon sent me the colors that I was missing. Okay, but I am going to create a purple because I know a bunch of you out there always ask when I do a rainbow and don't include the purple, like what happened to purple? So I'm going to mix a little bit of bee sting and blue skies, and I'm just going to do the same exact thing with the dry brush once those colors were mixed on a glass mat. I am working on a glass mat here because I'm not sure if these would stain my other mat. Another way is to use the stamping foam from Simon Hurley. This is my first time using stamping foam, but it's a lot of fun. There are 4 foams in there, and I'm going to heat up one of them. So there's not an exact amount of time you need to heat this up. The more time that you kind of heat it up, the easier it is to impress. And I'm going to press it onto an 3D embossing folder. I got an okay impression the first time. The second time I really heated up and then I really pressed it down into that 3D embossing folder. You can see I'm just applying tons of pressure there, but then check that out. I've created my own little background stamp there. So I'm going to do the same thing with the domed foam blender. I'm just going to take a bunch of the Blue Skies Lunar Paste and I'm going to just rub it onto this stamp that I've created in a circular fashion, just kind of a thick application. I want to work quickly enough that it doesn't dry out. You could spritz it with a little water to kind of activate it a little bit, but I really wanted to see if I could get the crispest stamp impression with this without any water. So once it was all covered, I flipped it over, and again I'm just applying tons of even pressure so that I make sure I get the whole stamp in one pass, because I'm afraid I'm gonna miss a spot. So I really kind of got the whole thing on there and then removed it, and check that out, and it'll be shiny too. So not only can you turn your 3D embossing folders into stamps, but you can make the stamp shiny as well. All you need is a little bit of water and a paper towel to clean that off, and you can reset those by reheating them as well, so you can reuse them. You don't have to keep them the same pattern. I'm also going to use a gel press with the Lunar Paste. It's been a while since I pulled out my gel press, so I have the Tim Holtz brayer here, and I'm going to add some of the Lunar Paste to the brayer by rolling it and picking up, to cover the entire brayer. And again, this is a pretty nicely quick drying medium, so I don't want to take a ton of time. I really just want to get in there, and then I put the Mosaic stencil down again, and I'm going to press a piece of white cardstock down on top. And that creates a really great look, but of course I want to go for that more mixed media effect. So I'm going to add some of the blue skies. This time I'm going to put the stencil down and put the blue skies on top of the stencil, and I'm going to peel that off and then lay my cardstock down again. So just with that gel press, just have lots of fun. You can absolutely clean these off. The gel press cleans off beautifully with some water. I think I show you later in the video, but just so you know, don't worry, it's not going to ruin your gel press. So I'm going to just keep doing this, adding more color and adding more prints onto this one piece of cardstock to get that really kind of artistic mixed media background going on there. You can see I'm coming in from the sides, I'm pressing in from the top, from the bottom, and just really having fun creating those backgrounds. Again, just spritz this all with water to clean it all off. Now let's turn these backgrounds into cards. For the first one, I am going to cut out the mosaic flower because I got a smear of black ink, of course I did, on the white cardstock. This is a pretty easy shape to fussy cut out. I am using the Tim Holtz little mini snips to do it, to get into those little tiny areas, and I'm leaving a little bit of a white border around the edge because the inner flower has that white border around the edge as well. So I figured that that the outer flower should match too, which makes it a little bit easier as well to not have to cut up right against the petals. After fussy cutting out, I was just noticing how much shine the mosaic flower has. So this is a really great way to add lunar paste to your projects, is to use a stencil and the Stencil Pal. Okay, so this sentiment is from the Nature's Silhouette stamp set. I'll show you that more in detail later. And I'm just gonna pop up that flower on some foam tape and call this card done, because I just love the beauty of the flower and the simplicity of the typeface in the sentiment as well. Okay, so here is that stamp set that I've been using these sentiments from. I'm going to use another sentiment from it as well for the black cardstock with the mosaic flower, and I am going to heat emboss that with white embossing powder and then just heat set that. So this time I didn't have to fussy cut it out. You'll see that I did get a little bit of the lunar paste underneath the flower, but we're going to cover that up in a second. To create the background, I'm using some of Simon's new No Diving ink, and I'm applying it to white cardstock with a domed foam blender, just blending out the entire panel with that color. And then I cut down the top panel with the flower to 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm using tape runner behind it to adhere it down to that inked panel underneath. For the little spot of lunar paste, I'm just using a black marker to cover it up. I won't recommend the Copics because I don't know if it's good for the nibs or not, but it did cover it up for sure. For the next card, I'm going to use Simon Says Stamps Misty Transparency Grid to line up a sentiment and a picnic bench image from Simon Hurley's latest Going Places stamp set. I'm going to stamp them in VersaFine Black Onyx ink, which is a pigment ink, which allows me to have time to add some clear embossing powder on top. So once I heat set that, both the sentiment and the picnic bench are going to be a little dimensional and black and shiny as well. And you can see just how amazing the sky and the grass look because they're so shiny too. So I cut it down a little bit and I'm matting it on some white cardstock, but you seriously cannot get this kind of shine with how easy it was to apply with the ink blenders. For the next card, I'm just going to stamp a sentiment from the Nature Silhouette stamp set that I shared before. This time I'm just using the Stamp Market's black ink because I'm going to stamp it on white cardstock and turn it into a sentiment strip. I trimmed down the dry brush rainbow into 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm matting it on some white cardstock. And then last but not least, I'm going to use a little bit of tape runner behind the sentiment as well and just place that down on the rainbow. This rainbow is so gorgeous in real life. The camera does not pick up all of the shine. I can't even describe to you how easy this was to put together and how much I love all of the shine of these colors. Okay, for the card that we used with the stamping foam, I did use the silhouette with the lighthouse from Nature's Silhouette. I did cut off some of the image on the right hand side, you can see there, and I stamped it a few times in No Diving because I wanted to show up that silhouette, but also the lunar paste acts a bit as a resist. So now I'm going to stamp the sentiment, which says the best adventures happen without Wi-Fi, which I absolutely love. And I trimmed down the panel pretty small so that it's going to be a small image on this white panel with the stamped sentiment at the top. And I love how you can see the pattern in the White House stamp. Okay, for this one, we're going to use the tree image from the Nature's Silhouettes stamp set. And this time I'm using VersaFine to stamp the trees themselves. They are silhouette, so you can stamp them in black ink. Now, I am working on the very mixed media looking background that we created with the gel press. So I'm going to stamp this about a bazillion times. I'm going to use my Debbie tool to get really good impressions, and I'm going to use that pigment ink to sit on top. The reason that I have to stamp it so many times is because there's tons of texture on the image itself, on that background. So I really wanted that tree image to come out as clear as I could get, but still have all that texture from the background that we created with all the different gel press prints. I stamped and heat embossed in white embossing powder the sentiment, and I'm going to adhere that to the very bottom of this card, and then I'm going to trim it down. I decided that those trees were literally never going to dry because I used pigment ink and like a ton of it. So I decided to cover them with clear embossing powder. If you ever have trouble with VersaFine and it's not drying for you, just cover it with some clear embossing powder and heat set it, and then it'll be shiny too and it won't smear. So this is how the mixed media one turned out, and that was a lot of fun to create. Thank you so much to Simon and Ranger for sending me these new products to share with you all. If you haven't seen it already, you can check out my last video with Simon's latest release over here. As always, I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon. Some of you may have remembered. Don't forget. I had coffee this morning. I have no excuse. Maybe the excuse is that it's not finished yet. I was like, I've got it. No, I don't have it. There we go. Wasn't that hard?